Sometime in the night, I woke up from a nightmare.
Well, I was kind of, I'd learned, played guitar and stuff my whole life growing up, but never good enough to be in a band or anything. So in high school, I came from a very religious school, like a fundamentalist Christian school, like kind of Bob Jones Liberty University style thing.
I did. I went to one from birth to the 6th grade.
I went from kindergarten to 12th grade.
Yeah.
It was good for me because became a person that just questioned. Like, I was like, this is bullshit, after a while. It took a long time, it took like 10th grade or something. But, so my sister and brother went to college. I was the youngest, and my sister sent me back some books, like Slaughterhouse Five, The Stranger, and On the Road. Banned books from my school. So that really got me going into reading, and I kind of got into read all those people's books, especially like the beat writers and stuff. So I was kind of writing a lot of bad beat poetry and shit, and went to Mississippi College, and there was actually quite a lot of smart, well-read people there, and a lot of people obviously from a religious background. So I kind of fit in there, but started trying to write some stories with some people there, but I really became a fan of Barry Hanna, who was teaching here, because he had written Geronimo Rex, which is kind of set in Mississippi College, and so I really loved that book. And I came up here. It was the summer of 1989, and my sister's boyfriend had a band called Jet Screamer at the time from Jackson, Mississippi, and they were up here for school, and they played actually downstairs. This used to be a club called Sid and Harry's, and they played downstairs from here. And I just read Geronimo Rex, and Barry Hanna comes in that night with his trumpet, and he's kind of drunk and wanting to sit in and stuff, and so it was kind of a crazy night. He got up and played some trumpet. It was just the worst thing you've ever heard, and he was bugging them the whole time. Let me get up there, and they finally let him up. It was just awful. But, and so I lived here during that summer, and then I lost my scholarship at Mississippi College, and then had to go move in with my dad for a couple of months, and was just like, no. I just came back up here and was kind of living on my sister's porch, and got into school here to take Hannah's class, and I wanted to try to write some stuff, and so I was doing that, and another guy from Jackson that was up here in school named Paul Tucker. He was a couple of years older than me, but he was putting a band together, and he was like, "Do you play bass?" And I played some stand-up bass growing up, and I was just kind of lied, oh yeah, I don't know, I don't really have a bass, but he had a bass, so I started playing in a band with him called the Sky Pilots, and did that for a few years while I was in school, and taking Hannah's class and some other writing classes, and then when you're 20 years old, and there's somebody that's 23, it's man, they're old. You think they're and now they're
Right.
So Paul was a couple years older than me, and right down the street here in this house, there was a couple other guys that were actually my age, which is 21, and they were playing. They had a band called the Neckbones, a 3-piece, and I was living with them. Two of the guys went home for summer, because they were sophomores or something coming into junior year, and I was living with one of the guys, so I wanted to play guitar because I want to play guitar, and these guys were, so I started playing with the drummer Forrest Hughes on that summer. Started making up. I had reams of terrible poetry, but there was some ideas in there, and also I had a 1980 Datsun 510 at the time, and the cassette deck, the Stooges Funhouse, was stuck in the cassette deck for like a year. And I didn't even really try to get it out because it was the greatest record ever made. And I started the songs were coming out like that, just kind of that basic primitive songs. And I started, and they were a 3-piece where Forrest, the drummer, sang all the songs. So they kind of wanted another guitarist and another person to sing some stuff. So that was kind of the genesis of it, just starting to play with them. And we immediately started getting a good crowd and they, two of the guys were from the Mississippi, from Gulfport. And there was a bunch of people from the coast up here, and coast people are kind of wild. I don't know if they're kind of it's a different thing there. And it's kind of like New Orleans spilled out more than, it's a lot of Catholics and stuff, people who drink and gamble. And so we started getting these huge crowds here, and really, Fat Possum was here, and I was actually friends with Matthew Johnson, the guy who took over from Peter Lee, who originally started Fat Possum. And we had been in writing class, Hannah's class together. And so he was coming out to see the band, and it was there was a place called Ireland's down here, kind of like the local, kind of a redneck bar, not redneck, but more like locals. And that's also where Larry Brown would hang out there and stuff. So just started writing rock and roll songs, and it just kind of. And I lived actually next door to Barry Hannah. And he was just, you're going to have to make a choice, between rock and roll and, I was like, nah. But he was kind of right. I became obsessed with songs and stuff. Like I was saying tonight, it's just, you got 3 minutes, and it's basically two, the kind of the Ramones style, 2 verses and then repeat the first verse. And maybe a bridge, or maybe not, so
3 chords in the truth.
Exactly. I know. I started just becoming obsessed with songs and stuff, and just so that's sort of where it veered off, and I always kept some notebooks would from time to time start a novel or I wrote a bunch of stories along the way that I never did anything with, but so that was kind of the, and then one kind of changing moment was I was working at this place, it was a steakhouse here in town, and it went out of business. And I had read this novelist, Robert Stone, who had a quote, unemployment is the poor man's Guggenheim. So I was like, I'm going to just do that. I'm going to take that's unemployment. I'm just going to work on every day. I'm going to work on some stuff like it's, and it was like 130 a week, and just barely enough to pay my rent and eat and have beer and stuff. But during that time, I worked on this kind of musical called The Outlaw Biker, and it ended up performing it over at the Powerhouse like 2 or 3 years later, but sort of finishing that and was kind of an inspiration to go back and try to do some more writing and stuff.
Yeah, when was that? I saw that was published by the same.
Oh yeah, they put that out. We had like the 10th anniversary last year or something, so they did that for this, especially for that.
Yeah.
But so that was like maybe 2013 or something, 11. But I guess I'd written it a few years earlier, and shown it to a bunch of people, and people were like, yeah, whatever. Finally, one guy that had done a lot of theaters directing was like, yeah, we could do this. Really? Okay.
I tell you how the Neckbones got on my radar. In 1993, I started drinking malt liquor early that morning and was put in the back of my own Pathfinder and driven over here with a big group of people because we had heard that somehow somebody booked Fugazi at the library. And we were just like, nah, probably not, probably not, but we'll go anyway. And I think I was probably those kids. If you ever saw that, if you ever saw Document,
I did.
and the kids in the parking lot, they're just like, I don't know, man, this is punk rock, like fuck everybody. And it's like, what is it about our music that makes you think that, that whole thing? I didn't know. I just knew like Margin Walker, and that stuff was my like coming alive records when I was young. So walking in for that, and then you guys opening it up, like how did that come to be?
Man, I forget the exact details, except that they were coming here and they needed an opener, I think, and I was working at the record store, so Uncle Buck's, and I think maybe Mitch Ulrich, the owner, might have hooked that up, or also some Proud Larry's people. We played there, and I guess we were kind of the only punk rock game in town, so like, oh, this band can do it. So, but we were also big fans, huge fans of theirs. It was kind of so in the movie you can see them backstage, or you can hear us on stage.
Yep, I always get hyped. I'm like, do you know who that is? That's playing? It's the Neckbones. I was out there when that happened.
Well, and it was cool because they were really like Ian Mackay or whatever was like, we came over afterwards to the record store, and I had this book of photographs from like the glam era, like T-Rex and Bowie and stuff, and I had it at work for like 2 months, so I looked at it I was just sick of it. I was like, he was looking through, and I was like, man, you can just take that. I was like, really? And then when he got home, he sent me that book, Banned in D.C., of photographs. He was like, man, thank you so much for the photo book. Here's one, and he signed it and stuff.
That's too cool.
And so I thought that was, really cool.
You look up Integrity, and there's going to be a picture of that guy right next to it.
Definitely. So that was kind of a, that was kind of a great night for sure.
Yeah. Well, so I understand now. I guess I always assumed that you went, listening to the radio and watching TV to like getting turned on to music to then literature. But it sounds like literature was kind of the first place that maybe you stuck your head into a world that, was outside of your surroundings.
I tried to have a band in high school with a friend of mine that was a drummer that was kind of like into hardcore and thrash and stuff, and like I was into punk rock, but I also like really I loved the Who, and like I kind of wanted to be Pete Townsend, so we had this little punk rock band called Meager Existence. But like I couldn't play fast, so it kind of just lasted a few bedroom practices at my buddy Steve's house.
Yep.
And so I wanted to be in a band, and it was like, the singer had like the Notebook. It was like fuck society and stuff. It was like.
Literally, I was in that same band.
And it was fun. I just couldn't. And then the other guitar player was a friend that was like a Springsteen guy. So he would get up and sing this like fake Springsteen kind of song, and I would try to do this like windmills and shit. And then and he was like, and the drummer's like, right. And then the singer's just like, fuck society, and it was just like. And then his mom
Crowd
would
goes wild.
banging on the door. It
Yeah.
just didn't work. But I wanted to be in a band, and I just, but just kind of wanted to do this writing thing, And,
Yeah.
Sometime in the night, I woke up from a nightmare. My arm was under my body and had gone numb. When I woke up, it was limp and useless. Panic set in as I slung it around to try to get some feeling back, get the blood flowing again. By the time I got a tingle of feeling back, I was wide awake. I guess I'd passed out the night before. I was still wearing my clothes and my shoes. I crept outside as quiet as I could and smoked on the corner of the porch. A light rainfall on the tent overhang, but I could still smell the bay water on the wind. I closed my eyes and rubbed my face with my free hand. The door creaked open, and the old man poked his head out and smiled at me. Then he came on out. He just looked at me with a wicked smile like Gabby Hayes eyeballing John Wayne. "You want a cigarette?" I finally asked. "Well, since you're offering," Beasley said. He took the smoke and put it in his mouth. I handed him the lighter. He lit the cigarette, took a long drag, and stared out into the yard. "Did I hear something about you being from over to Holmes County?" he asked, not looking at me. "Let's just say I have some deep roots over there," I said. "Why do you ask?" "I thought I heard that, and it reminded me of a story a friend of mine from over there told me." He smiled and looked at me. "You know Jimmy Foxworth's over there?" he asked. "I know a few Foxworths, don't recall a Jimmy," I said. "Well, he may be dead now." "Well, he told me the story. It seems there was a fellow over there that kept chickens. He had this neighbor that had a dog. The dog kept coming over to the man's yard and killing his chickens. And the man with the chickens had seen the neighbor's dog over there. So he goes to the man and says, 'Your dog is coming over to my yard and killing my chickens. You need to tie your dog or kill your dog or somehow keep him from killing my chickens.' Well, the man with the dog tells him, 'It's not my dog.' But the next week, the dog comes over and kills a couple more of the man's chickens. Again, the man goes over to the dog's owner's house and says, 'Tie your dog, he's killed some more of my chickens.' 'It's not my dog,' the man says. So the man with the chickens goes to the hardware store and buys some strychnine. You could buy it back then for rats and whatnot. Then the man goes to the butcher shop and buys some hamburger meat. He mixes the strychnine with the hamburger meat. He goes to his house and gets his 12-gauge shotgun. Then he goes to the man's house and throws the poisoned meat to the dog. And when the dog owner comes out of the house, the man holds the shotgun on him and makes the man watch his dog eat the poisoned meat." The old man grinned. "That sounds like Holmes County," I said. "The dog didn't kill any more of the man's chickens," the old man said, satisfied with the completion of a good story. "Well, I think I've heard that one before," I mumbled. "Well, you must know Jimmy then," he said. "Shit, he's probably my kin." See, I went back over there to Holmes County a few times back in them old days. I never did like it all that much. It always felt a little bit on edge over there. He laughed. "But you know, back in them days, I used to go over to Peppertown. You know where that is?" "Yeah, right over there by Bonifay. Nothing over there now but some empty buildings," I said. "Well, you know why they called it Peppertown, don't you?" he asked. "No, Why? His take on Holmes County interested me. The stories. Even though I planned to never go back, the place haunted me. The strangeness, the tall tales, even the bad times meant something. Well, they called it Peppertown because it was hot. He let out a hearty laugh and coughed. They had some boarding houses down there, 2 or 3 honky-tonks, a few houses of ill repute. When I was down there was still some logging being done. I guess I was 15, nearly 16. I worked a couple of weeks. Damn hard labor. Come payday, Peppertown would be hopping. Most of the men would start drinking on Friday and stop on Sunday evening if they hadn't fallen out before then. And they had that good, clean corn liquor. Anyhow, second weekend, I got my pay and got me a little bottle and headed to my rooming house. I was going to clean up, rest a bit, hit that bottle, then hit one of them honky-tonks. I laid down on my bed, took a few drinks. I hear a commotion out my back window. These 2 men are fighting. There's a big man and a smaller man. The big man has the smaller one in some kind of a bear hug. The smaller fella is scratching the big fella's face. The big man leans in and bites off a piece of the man's cheek and spits it on the ground. And the littler man goes wild and starts grabbing at his own face with a kind of pitiful scream. The big man kicks him to the ground and pulls out a Bowie knife out of his boot and just stabs the man in the back. The man falls over dead. As Beasley's telling the story, a look of fear comes over his face. He looked at me and then back out into the rain. Well, the big man looks around to see if anybody saw anything. He catches me looking from the second-story window. He tucks the knife in his boot and starts walking real fast towards the boarding house. I realized real quick like that he's coming for me. Hell, I took off out the front door, left all my things, my bottle. As I'm coming out the front door, he's coming around the side. He sees me. He wasn't running, just walking real fast towards me. And he yells out, "Boy, you better run. You better not come back here. I know who you are." And kept walking towards me. Peppertown was really close to the tracks back then, and I got down there right as a log train was passing. I jumped on there and stayed till past Mobile. Never did go back to Peppertown or Holmes County. And I wouldn't recommend anybody going back there. You know what I mean, Ronnie? "Yeah, I hear you," I said, startled by the story. "You got another smoke, Hoss?" he asked. I tossed him a smoke, and he laughed and put it behind his ear. "Thanks, buddy. Now get some sleep. You're going to need it." He smiled and quietly slipped inside. Was that some kind of warning? I'd heard other stories like that. Some about men I knew, or I knew their sons and nephews. When I worked over there, I'd stay 3 or 4 days, sometimes a week. We'd haunt some honky-tonks and juke joints. We'd see a good deal of violence. But I got the feeling that just a few generations before me, there was real trouble. The men that had been there since Prohibition and the Depression had a look about them. Something around the eyes, a roughness in the hands, missing fingers from mill work, and scars on their faces. You could see some of these men in churches with their families, and you knew they'd been through hell, but they had a sweetness to them, a gentleness. They were thankful for surviving, for their families and the comfort of the church pew. You'd also see some of the other men, the mean ones, men like my Uncle Albert. They seemed to have a bitterness and a dangerous anger that showed in their faces, like the markings of a poisonous snake you should steer clear of. Their families would cower behind them, whipped into submission by corporal violence. Nobody on the outside willing or able to help them. It seemed like the whole community fought a pitched battle between the flesh and the spirit. And as the battle for the town raged on, the battle raged in each and every person in the town. I could almost hear my daddy from the pulpit preaching a sermon. The flesh and the spirit are in a constant battle. Matthew 6:24. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. I could picture him in the pulpit with his black suit and black tie and horn-rimmed glasses, sweating and shouting, the congregation shouting amen, some chanting a prayer, my mother raising her hands towards the heavens with their eyes closed. You must choose between God and man. The Bible says in Revelations 3:16, so then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. You've got to choose, people. As a child, I was afraid. Was I good or bad? My father told me I wasn't old enough yet to decide, but he was sure that I was good. The Lord loved me. I felt nothing but fear. When after he was gone, I wasn't convinced that anyone could be just one thing, could just love God and not the flesh. I had both in me, good and evil, or whatever you call it. The war would never end. No side would win. I felt like this war might just kill me, and then there would be nothing. It wouldn't matter anyway. It'd just be darkness. And if that was the case, maybe the things in me fighting each other weren't God and the devil, but just destruction and creation. The desire to let the wild side take its course with the violence, the sex, and the drugs, or the peacefulness of family and the comfort and security of a home. I'd been able to put the fight on hold while I was in prison, but now the hostilities had begun again. It was almost like each side was making its case to me through circumstances and through fate and through my reactions to them. And there was a third part of me that almost longed for prison again, for the quiet, the walking death of being locked up. But then I thought of my daughter Tina, and I cried. And out of the tears came a rage, all in a split second. Then tiredness hit me all at once. I tossed my cigarette into the rain and quietly returned to my bunk. And somehow I drifted off to sleep. My last thought, fuck it, who gives a shit anyway? All right?